2 years later, Spielberg and Bluth released The Land Before Time. It's the story of Littlefoot, a young longneck,
Apatosaurus,
who had to move with his family with the other dinosaurs to find a new home. But then, a sharp-tooth,
Tyrannosaurus Rex,
came and fought against Littlefoot's mom to get something to eat, all ending with her sacrificing her life to stop it from having its dinner. After that, Littlefoot would meet other young dinosaurs like Sarah, a three-horn,
Triceratops,
Ducky, a big mouth,
Parasaurolophus,
Petrie, a flyer,
Pteranodon,
and Spike, a spike-tail.
Stegosaurus.
Together, they must team up to go find their families in the Great Valley.
Goal of the plot.
When production began, Steven Spielberg and coming into the team, George Lucas, originally wanted to make the film have no dialogue at all. Something like the Rite of Spring segment from Fantasia, but longer. But to make it more appealing for kids, they decided to add in dialogue. Wait a minute. A film about dinosaurs that was supposed to have no dialogue at all, but then ended up having it anyway to bring in more money. I've heard of that before. But where? Oh yeah! For the movie, there was a huge amount of research put in. The crew would go to many museums like the Natural History Museum in New York and LA, and even the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. The animators made more than 600 backgrounds for the movie, and in total, there was more than 1 million drawings for The Land Before Time. I think that 2-minute stack of cells seems pretty realistic by now. During production, it was a true nightmare for Don. Universal and Amblin had told Sullivan Bluth Studios not to start production on this film before An American Tail was released, and they want The Land Before Time to be released the next year. But because the pressure was on Bluth and the fact that they were still relocating to Ireland, they started production in the summer of '86, and because of the moving, the film got delayed to 1988. Not only that, but Don barely had any contacts with Spielberg since he was too busy working on Always and Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. And if that wasn't enough, during the beginning of production, Bluth, Goldman, and Pomeroy still had to pay the animators while they had no script to work with. So to keep the animators occupied, they animated this opening sequence that has nothing to do with the movie. Have you people ever noticed that before? Anyways, another thing that was hell in the production was taking some things out of the movie. Because that there were a lot of scenes that the producers thought was way too scary and might traumatize kids for life, they had to either remove or trim some scenes that mostly involved the evil Sharptooth and sequences of the lead characters in danger. Don was determined to keep those scenes in the movie, but deep down inside, he knew that it was the right thing to do. Because of this, about more than 11 minutes of the movie had to be taken out. At one point, they even thought of removing the scene where Littlefoot's mom dies. Heck, they brought it to some psychologist to know what to do with that scene. Their answer was to keep it so we know why Littlefoot had to go find the Great Valley alone, and to add in a scene where someone would tell Littlefoot that even if someone dies,
she'll always be with you, as long as you remember the things she taught you.
And that's why the character Rooter, aka the narrator, was made. When it was released on November 18th, 1988, it wasn't alone. It was released on the same day as Disney's Oliver and Company. Both films got good reviews from critics for the same reasons. Financially worldwide, it was The Land Before Time that earned more with more than $84 million. Wait, haven't I done this before? Probably not. 6 years after its release, The Land Before Time earned its first direct-to-video sequel called The Great Valley Adventure. After that, there was another one released a year later. And then there was another one. And then another one. And then another one. And then another one. And then another one! In other words,
Vegeta!
What does the scouter say about the number of Land Before Time sequels?
It's over 9,000! What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right!
Actually, there's less than that, but considering that there's also a TV series based on the movie, might as well be. During the time they were making The Land Before Time, Morris Sullivan had big dreams for the studio. Not only did he want Sullivan Bluth Studios to be the best thing that Ireland ever had, but he also wanted to make live-action films, TV commercials, and even wanting to buy a distribution company to not only show their animated films, but other Irish films as well. Also, he spent more than $4.5 million on new and better equipment for the Irish studio. However, on February 1988, Sullivan ditched the whole idea of the live-action and distribution company thing to be with Goldcrest Films. Goldcrest said that they would produce 3 animated films with them, each budgeted at around $13 to $14 million. Another thing about the deal is that they let Don Bluth free to make his animated films the way he wanted instead of being under the tyranny of Universal and Amblin. Woohoo! In the summer of 1988, Goldcrest picked up those old ideas that Sullivan had of making live-action films and distribution and said that they might actually do it. Not only that, but they also announced that they want to do Saturday morning cartoons that would have the same animation quality as the movies they were making. But then a few months later, they all went, screw the TV thing. Why don't we just focus on All Dogs Go to Heaven instead? Oh, speaking of which, it's our next subject. It's the story of Charlie B. Barkin, a con artist German shepherd who escaped the pound and returned to his casino that he used to own with his ex-partner, Carface. But Carface isn't amused that Charlie returned, so he made Charlie drunk and killed him with a car. The end. Nah, just kidding. He goes to heaven and then comes back to Earth by reversing his life watch or something. Then, he rescues a little girl from Carface called Anne-Marie, who has the ability to talk to animals. And he uses her so he could steal and gamble out of the animals she talks to get a buttload of money. This is our hero, ladies and gentlemen, the character we're supposed to be rooting for. Anyways, Charlie would start to have feelings for Anne-Marie, and he would save her from being drowned by Carface and the legend himself. The idea of this film goes way back to when The Secret of NIMH was finished. The original idea was 3 shorts of a German Shepherd private eye with Burt Reynolds as the main character. But the idea was scrapped after the first studio was bankrupt. Then, in November 1987, Bluth, Goldman, and Pomeroy had a story meeting and decided to bring that dog idea back. Morris Sullivan said that the reason why they want to do a movie with dogs is that some of the best animated films like Lady and the Tramp, 101 Dalmatians, and The Fox and the Hound all feature dogs. During that meeting, they were thinking about the title. They wanted something that's an eye-catcher and that's provocative. So Don thought of a title that he heard from a story in the 4th grade called All Dogs Go to Heaven. Once they got the title and the main idea of the story, they filled the rest with some plot elements from It's a Wonderful Life, Little Miss Marker, and a guy named Joe, or Heaven Can Wait. For the voices, they got Burt Reynolds like in the original idea, and Dom DeLuise, aka the John Ratzenberger of Don Bluth films, kinda, as the main characters, Charlie and Itchy. To record their lines, they did it together and they asked Don and the gang to leave the recording room so they could ad-lib in peace. Another pair that voiced together was Vic Tayback and Charles Nelson Riley, the voices of Carface and Killer. This would be the last film for Judith Barcy, the voice of Anne-Marie and Ducky in The Land Before Time, before... You know what? I'm not gonna say it. I'd rather you guys not know why is this her last film. If you guys want to know what happened to her, go find out yourself. But I must warn you, when you find out, You will regret it for the rest of your life and will always think, yo man, I should have listened to Animat. Anyways, during production, there was another Sullivan Bluth Studios that opened in the US, and John Pomeroy left Ireland to be in charge of the American studio so they can finish up the animation there. Like in The Land Before Time, they had to cut some parts of the movie because it was considered too scary for kids, and now have a new goal to tone down the rating from PG to G. Most of the scenes cut were the parts where Charlie gets hit by the car and his nightmare scene where he's in hell. Unlike other cutscenes that are gone, Bluth is the only person right now that owns an uncut version of the film. Whether or not that uncut version will be released on home video, it'll probably take a while. When it was released on November 17th, 1989, it was like The Land Before Time. All Dogs Go to Heaven was out at the same time as another Disney animated film. But this time, well, how can I put this?
Can't keep a good dog down.
It was freaking nuked by The Little Mermaid, getting only more than $27 million at the box office. And if that wasn't enough, wait till you hear the critics! While a few liked it for the emotional aspects, the humor, and the bright saturated colors of the film, they bashed it for the narration, the inconsistent animation, and the songs of the film. And what's worse, they did it all by comparing it to The Little Mermaid. Can you say ouch? However, even if it had a bad rap in theaters, it became a legend in home video by being one of the best-selling VHSs of all times, with more than 3 million copies sold in a month. After that, it got a sequel that was released in theaters, a series that lasted for 40 episodes, and even a Christmas carol of the film. At this point of the history, I think you'll know what's going to happen next when I say, welcome to the Disney Renaissance. In 1992, Sullivan Bluth Studios released Rock-a-Doodle, based on one of the Canterbury Tales by Jeffrey Chalker. It's the story of a live-action kid named Edmund, whose mom reads him the story of Chanticleer, a rooster who can bring out the sun by singing. One day, the sun didn't come up when he sang, so he got humiliated by his gang and ran away. Back in the real world, there was a big storm and the villain of the book, the Grand Duke of Owls, crashed in Edmund's room and turned everything into animation. Even Edmund turned into a furry. I know that sounds weird, but I'm just quoting what the kid said.
Jeepers! I'm a furry!
Anyways, the other characters come in to save the kid, and now they all head out to find Chanticleer. The idea of turning this into an animated film goes way back. And when I mean back, I mean during the late 30s at Disney. They originally wanted to make an animated film that would feature Chanticleer and Reynard the Fox, but Walt Disney ditched the idea. However, to this day, there are several character designs by Mark Davis that still exist of the planned movie. Fast forwarding more than 40 years later, after Don finished The Secret of NIMH, he announced that he would make a movie based on Chanticleer. But as we all know, there was a bankruptcy that screwed it all up. Then, in the late 80s, Bluth and the gang were fascinated by Who Framed Roger Rabbit and have a new idea for the story. They thought up of a film that would be half live action, half animated, and the live action sequence would be in black and white, like in The Wizard of Oz. For the live action sequence, they hired Victor French to be the director. But then he got terminal lung cancer and had to leave the project, which led to Don to do the directing in both the animation and the live action sequence. This experience, however, traumatized Bluth and said that animation is easier for him. Well, I could understand. It's like using an iPad as an MP3 player. Sure, it may get the job done, but I don't think he'll be doing that again anytime soon. For the voices, they brought in Glenn Campbell to be the voice of Chanticleer. He was hired mainly because Don loved his yodeling in the song I Remember You. This would be the last time that Phil Harris, the voice of Patou in the movie, and also voiced several Disney characters like Baloo, Thomas O'Malley, and Little John, would be in a feature before he passed away 4 years after Rock-a-Doodle's release. But it was Toby Scott Gainger's first movie role, who was Edmund in the movie. For this film, the crew set up a new goal after what happened with All Dogs Go to Heaven, to get good reviews from the critics. For this to happen, they had numerous screen testing and made a lot of changes based on audiences' reactions. An example would be to make Goldie, the one who looks like a mix of Princess Daphne from Dragon's Lair and Tweety, look a little less sexy, even though the whole idea of Goldie is just wrong in the first place. However, this mission does come with a price. The crew had to work overtime to make these changes. During production, Don's arch nemesis, financial troubles, is starting to appear again. Goldcrest was so horrified to the results of All Dogs Go to Heaven that they said that after Rock-a-Doodle, they end their deal. But that wasn't the worst part. After that, Goldcrest wanted to liquidate Sullivan Bluth because they couldn't pay a $300,000 loan, but then ditched the idea and settled outside of court. Also, Sullivan Bluth had to give away the ownership of their artwork to Goldcrest, meaning no more animation cells for sale. Originally, it was supposed to be released on Christmas 1991, but to avoid being in competition with Disney again and against his own creation turned into a cowboy, he moved the release date to April 3rd, 1992. When it was released, it was in competition again! This time, it was against 20th Century Fox's Fern Gully: The Last Rainforest, which was released a week after Rock-a-Doodle. And guess what? The chicken didn't even win that box office battle! While Fern Gully got almost $33 million, Rock-a-Doodle only got more than $11 million. And what about that mission to please the critics? Well, that really failed. Even worse than All Dogs Go to Heaven. It got a lot of bad reviews from the critics, mostly from the crappy narrative and the story. At this point of Don Bluth's films, I think the nostalgia critic said it best.
In the 90s, I think he left his brain at the FUBAR convention because he turned out some very strange, very mediocre material. The good stuff seemed to end with All Dogs Go to Heaven, and the bad stuff seemed to begin with Rock-a-Doodle.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Actually, I could, but I'm just lazy.